So you don't know what it's going to cost or what they have to do?
We have no idea what it's going to be. If it's like the
great.
water pump or she needs a new temperature gauge, but there's no smoke coming out of her. And
That's okay.
I mean, she runs like the day I bought her.
Yeah.
I got her with 33 miles on her. So
damn.
We're kind of connected. Like, yeah. Like BB-8 and Poe.
I hope you have like a X-Wing pilot jumpsuit that you wear occasionally when you drive that truck.
No, but that's a great idea.
Make Erin dress up like Chewie.
I do talk to her in Rubber Dash, so I'm like, oh, don't worry, Chewie, it's okay. You got this.
Every so often, got to give it a swift punch to make everything turn on.
She doesn't have a radio right now, so I turn my phone on and I put it in the little console, and it kind of gives me a speaker. But I mean, she's a little workhorse. She does what she needs
I would
to
definitely
do.
classify that as having special modifications, like the Falcon.
Yeah, exactly. I have to bypass the compressor.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Bry Guy and His Super Friends. I'm your host, Brian Labick. Joining me for this episode is the one and only Paula Miller.
Raylo is my halo.
You're going to keep that even when Bradley's not here.
I think so. Yeah, because he's eventually going to listen to it, so.
I doubt that, but we'll try to make sure he does. So, Bradley, this one's for you. All right, so Paul and I are the only ones here. We will be talking about Solo, a Star Wars story.
I wouldn't let you go solo on this one.
Yeah, I feel like there's going to be a lot of Solo puns or jokes throughout this whole thing. I think this will work really, really well. So, if you haven't been following along, Solo is the second Star Wars standalone movie after Rogue One. I don't know if... I mean, I'm still trying to figure out if maybe this movie, more so than Rogue One, is trying to test the water. If they are able to revisit single character stories and spin-off standalones like this, because Rogue One was kind of an ensemble for what they did. Solo is based basically on Han. I guess you could even include Chewie in there too.
Right.
And if you believe the rumors, because nothing, I keep saying they're rumors because nothing has officially been announced yet, but there are rumors of at least 2, maybe 3 other character standalone spin-offs that may be happening. And I think, like, Boba Fett's the most recent one that came up. Obi-Wan's been rumored for a while. Yoda keeps coming up for some reason, and I don't really know if I want to see that one either. So, I'm calling them rumors because I haven't seen anything official from Lucasfilm or Disney saying that these are happening, that there's a director attached, or anybody creatively linked to these things. It's a lot of internet speculation at this point. So we'll see. And that's what I'm wondering, if they're not officially announcing anything until after this movie comes out and how it does, to see where they go from here. But again, I guess time will tell for that.
I agree. I did just read something today about how there was rumors out there that there's going to be 2 more Solo films.
I'm pretty sure Alden signed for 3,
yeah,
from what I heard.
So I would not be upset with that.
We'll get into that because I agree. And if you haven't been following along with this movie, what I wanted to do just at first is this one, definitely above all the other recent Star Wars movies that have come out. This one seems to have the most shit happen to it over the last year or so. So it probably has been about a year, I think. This movie started to get into a bit of trouble. Originally, they had Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who directed the Lego Movie and the Jump Street movies, were hired to direct this movie, with a script from Lawrence and John Kasdan. The movie was fully in production. It had about 3 weeks left of principal photography, and Lord and Miller were fired from the film. The official PR response was, quote-unquote, creative differences between directors, producer Kathleen Kennedy, and the Kasdans. So that completely caught everybody off guard, I think. No one was expecting that to happen or realized that this movie was in that much trouble. And then shortly after that blew up, it was announced that Ron Howard would be coming in to save the project. The most recent number I think that I had read was that Howard reshot about 70% of the film, which is why he is the sole director credit on the film. And the numbers that I saw tossing around too, that it forced the budget from originally 150 million up to 250 million.
That's what I read as well. Yeah.
Okay. And that's going to come into play, I think, in a little bit here. And I know we've talked about this drama when it blew up, that we did do an episode of talking about all the shit that happened and why that they might have left and stuff like that. So if you want to revisit that, that's out there. And I know we talked about some of the trailers on previous episodes. Even when we talked about the trailers, I don't really remember too many of us getting really excited for it. Like, I think we were going to see it, obviously, but I don't think it was really high on anybody's radar. At least not compared to, like, the levels of episode 7 or 8 or anything like that. Or even Rogue One, even. I think we really looked forward to Rogue One from the trailers, too. And I don't know if it had anything to do with it, but the opening weekend for Solo did not do very well. At least compared to other Star Wars movies and what they projected. It opened over the 3-day weekend at 85 million, which was lower than projections. If you count the 4-day Memorial Day weekend, I think it just crossed 100 million. I think it was like 103. So it is now, I think, projected to finish its theatrical run below 500 million, which is low for a Star Wars movie. I think that's the number that I think I've seen for them to basically break even. If they make 500 million, the movie is even. And all the other recent Star Wars movies, Force Awakens, Rogue One, Last Jedi, all of those have crossed over 1 billion in their theatrical run. So this one will fall well below other Star Wars movies. So
I can't imagine, like, this one just seems like so much more fun than Rogue One. Like, Rogue One was so dark, and this one just seems like such a fun time. I'm just surprised it's not doing better.
And that's something I want to get into too, because, like, considering, since now that we've seen it, and even though it may not have been high on people's anticipation lists, I do think it's a lot better than I expected it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And now that we're reading about how bad it did, I guess, its opening weekend, and not even word of mouth, because I feel like word of mouth is actually pretty good for this movie too, but what do you think it is about this movie at this time that caused it to fall below what it probably should have? Like, I don't know if it was, do you think it was the few bullet points I have, like, release date might have been a thing.
Timing.
Could this be, like, franchise fatigue? Could it be with all the behind-the-scenes shit that happens? Is there any other ideas you have why this may have fallen short?
All of those things. I think the timing of it, it's being released with Deadpool 2, it's being released with Avengers, the controversy behind it. But if you're going to have, like, a pitch hitter, like, it's Ron Howard, like, come on.
Yeah.
Ron Howard's going to save the day. I mean, I was looking forward to this more than Rogue One.
Okay.
With Harrison Ford being so beloved, it's so hard to think of somebody else in his role. And, you know, Alden didn't really look like Han Solo.
Right.
I know we talked about, like, there was other choices I probably would have went with, but as you're getting into the movie, you're, like, kind of falling into it and accepting that it's, you know, this is the Han Solo version that we get.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's all of those things that kind of, I don't think it's fatigue, but I do believe there's some butthurt fanboys out there who hated The Last Jedi, who are just rebelling and not seeing anything because Kathleen Kennedy's in charge and they hate her, which is ridiculous because she's amazing. I mean, we have Star Wars, so shut up and see the movie.
Right, yeah. That was something I was going to bring up too. I think coming only 6 months after The Last Jedi, and as divisive as that movie is, I think there is a lot of Star Wars fans that were really turned off from the franchise just because of that movie. And now they just, like you said, they're sort of, like, in spite of, just to, like, spite Kathleen Kennedy and everybody, like, oh, we're not going to see your shit anymore, so take that.
I mean, it's a Kasdan written movie. Like,
yeah.
It's a great movie. It's a great ride. It's an enjoyable movie, and there's some things in it I can't say right now because it would be a spoiler. Good thing I caught myself. See, I can do it, Brian.
Edit you out. I don't want to have to edit you out.
Yeah, don't want to make you do more work. But yeah, I do think it's all of those things. Did I hit on most of them? Like,
yeah, I mean, you mentioned the two movies that it's competing against right now that are the top three is Infinity War, Deadpool 2, and Solo.
mm-hmm.
And Solo won its weekend with over the 3-day weekend, I think it was 85 million.
Yeah.
Deadpool 2 in its second weekend did 53 million. Now, if they pick a weekend that's not around Deadpool 2, that 53 million could have went straight to Solo. If there's and this is the thing, I know Josh and I have talked about this on previous episodes, is Star Wars had a good thing releasing in December. Why they chose to push this one to May really boggles me, especially so from what I remember, all the recent Star Wars movies, Force Awakens, Rogue One, Last Jedi, all of those were intended to be released in May. And all of them, for whatever reason, had different things happen where they delayed them until December.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the same thing happened with Episode 9, too. That was intended to go for May of 2019. But with the director's shake-up there, they pushed that to December so they could get that going. Solo, which had, I would think, the biggest director's shake-up out of all of these movies, did not have its release date changed. Out of all of them, why would you not move this one back to December? Especially considering the 3 movies prior to that have owned December.
Right. I wonder what's happening in December. Is there something crazy going on, like some big movie that it would have to compete with?
See, I haven't looked at the schedule recently. The only thing I can think of is maybe Disney itself has some other big movie that they're trying to release in December, and they don't want to compete against themselves. But at the same time, with Avengers still in theaters, they are sort of still competing with themselves. So what's the difference?
It might have been like tie-ins too with product. Everything's already purchased, everything's already made.
But I guess if they've done it 3 times before, I don't know why this one's the exception. That's sort of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Like the original trilogy and the prequels all traditionally opened in May. So that was something that George Lucas and Lucasfilm back then had done, but I don't know why that's a paradigm that Disney and Lucasfilm still need to do now.
Are we celebrating like the anniversary still, that they wanted something to come out like close to the anniversary of a Star Wars movie? Or, if
that's the case, I don't know why they don't release this one on May the 4th and moved Avengers to the end of May.
This winter, I know we were just talking about Disney, the new park opens in late fall.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they wanted to have something already set in place with Solo, so it didn't conflict with this giant launch of their new land that's opening in Disney World.
Yeah, maybe. That could be. Although at the same time, I feel like if you open a Star Wars land at Disney, it doesn't matter when you open that, people are going to go.
Right.
So it's not like I don't feel like it's something you need to market. Yeah, so, and sort of, I think I mentioned earlier, I don't think this is getting bad reviews. I feel like this is, the word of mouth that I've heard has actually been pretty positive for this movie. So I don't know if I don't know why bad reviews would turn people off from it if it's getting reviewed fairly. I guess maybe, depending on what you call good. Currently at Rotten Tomatoes, it's 71% for critics and 63% for fans. So that you could call that maybe mediocre, but I'd put that on the good side.
I think on Google I saw it was 83% positive.
Okay.
So if that's even better, because I know sometimes the critics on Rotten Tomatoes can be kind of harsh.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't actually read what they were saying. I just looked at the percentages. But I think that puts Solo as the third worst out of the Star Wars movies ranked on Rotten Tomatoes. I think Episode 2 and Episode 1 are the only 2 that are below that.
Oh, okay. Nobody likes a good backstory anymore?
Apparently not. You think about it too, this is something I've seen a couple people bring up online and stuff, is when the prequels came out, there was no Twitter, there was no social media, so, fans were vocal, but not as vocal as this.
Right.
When they didn't like something. So I think the reaction to Solo and The Last Jedi is really the same as what we had with the prequels, but it didn't hit as hard or as quickly as it does now today, thanks to social media and all the shit that you can just post online. So I'm looking at Rotten Tomatoes. Episode 1, 55% critics, 59% fans. Episode 2 is at 66% critics, which is higher than I would think. 57% fans. Episode 3, 79% critics, 65% fans. Yeah, Solo, 71% critics, 63% fans.
Oh, that's lower than I would expect.
Rogue One is 85% critic, 87% fans. Episode 4, 93% critic, 96% fan. Empire, 95% and 97%. That's expected.
Mm-hmm.
Return of the Jedi is 80% and 94%. Apparently, critics, I guess, didn't like that as much. Force Awakens, 93% and 87%. And The Last Jedi, 91% critics, 46% fans.
But hurt fanboys.
I can't get it. Star Wars fans are the worst type of fans. Like, they're the harshest to their own stuff that they are supposed to love.
Yeah.
And I never understood that.
Such a good time to be alive. I mean, I just watched it again the other day. I'm like, this movie is amazing. How do people not like this movie? It's so good.
I know. And I know a few people that they've tried to watch it a couple times and they still can't get behind it, but they're not like swearing off the franchise because of it.
Right.
That's a definite overreaction.
We still have one more movie.
Opinion.
Still one more movie.
Yeah, so I'm really curious now if people that didn't like The Last Jedi, if they're going to go into 9 thinking, okay, this is going to right all the wrongs, or if they're going to sort of, like we're presuming they did with Solo and just swear off the rest of the franchise and be like, nope, I'm done, I'm checking out.
There's more available seats for me. So
that's true.
I'm just, if they don't want to go, that's okay, I'll take their ticket. Stay off the day that they launch the tickets at like midnight. It's more for me.
Yeah, the problem is, even though, like, we'll say half of the Star Wars fan base does not go see that movie, there's still a shit ton of people that are going to go see that movie.
And then we're teaching new generations to love it, so... Yeah.
I'm actually curious to see what kids growing up now, like, if they see Solo, what they think of Solo. Like, us as adults that have sort of grown up with the franchise, and it's been ingrained in us since the little kids, and we're coming at these movies now as adults. I think we look at them a lot differently.
I think it's really making an impact with girls because I just read an article this woman out of Ireland did, and she said the last 4 Star Wars movie has the most dialogue for women.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
I think it's definitely making an impact with young girls. Now we have, Forces of Destiny. We have a great role model in, Rebels and the Clone Wars. And I see more of an impact with young women.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't really think about that. Yeah, because Rogue One was Jyn, so that's there's your central antagonist. Rey is a big part of the new sequel trilogy. I guess Kari I can't even say her name. Is it Kari?
Kira?
Kira. God, I still can't say it. I'm terrible with names.
It's okay.
Yeah, I guess so she even had a pretty good amount of dialogue compared to other Star Wars films too.
And they even included L3 in the female voice as well in that movie. So, I think it's definitely resonating more with girls and young women too. More than it. I mean, who didn't love Leia? She was amazing. She was brave. Right. She was a princess with a blaster. But we have so much more in that. I mean, now they get, they can wear underwear in space. So, hey.
Yeah.
We're evolving.
And like you said, Clone Wars has Ahsoka, Rebels has Hera and Sabine.
Yep.
So there's a lot of people out there.
But even the badass women villains in, the Clone Wars and Rebels have been amazing, like Asajj Ventress and the Night Sisters, and it's just, some really badass women in that too. So I think it's definitely bringing a whole new group of demographics into seeing Star Wars too.
Yeah. See, I find that stuff all interesting too. Mm-hmm. All right, so I think what we'll do now, and what I normally try to do when we do like these movie type review episodes, is before we get into the real meat of the stuff and the spoilers that we really, really want to talk about, I'm assuming some people listening to this have not seen the movie, and maybe they're waiting for our opinion before they see the movie. So at the front here, we'll talk generally spoiler free about what we thought of the movie. Before we get into spoilers, I'll throw out the spoiler warning so you know when we're going to hit that stuff.
Okay.
So before we get into the specifics and spoilers, Paula, what did you think of the movie? Spoiler-free thoughts.
It definitely exceeded my expectations. I enjoyed it from beginning to end. There wasn't a part of the movie where I was like, God, I wish this was over. Um,
Good sign.
Yeah, I was definitely looking forward to it. I was one of those people who are like, I don't know if Alden, not going to say his last name, starts with an E, is really my cup of tea for, playing Han Solo. But as I, watched it and I saw some scenes where they did some side shots of him and I'm like, oh my gosh, he looks like Han Solo in that. Or maybe it's my brain wanting him to look like Han Solo. But I enjoyed the stories of the characters, especially Chewie. I liked Kira's role. I think it was a fun ride, and I definitely want to see it again.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think the cast actually did really well. A lot better than not that I had any expectations really going in. I think Alden and Donald Glover stole the show for me.
Yeah.
I thought they were fantastic.
Absolutely.
I really like seeing certain specific Star Wars locations that have only been talked about and referenced in extended lore that we finally get to see on screen. So that was cool for like a longtime fan.
Mm-hmm.
There was actually a few really cool surprises that I didn't see coming, which anytime a movie can surprise me, that already bumps it up a few points for me. The soundtrack for this movie too, I thought was really, really good. There's a lot of like hidden original trilogy cues in the music that I really enjoyed.
Was this still done? Is this the last one done by John Williams?
John Williams did they established and created a theme for Han Solo.
Okay.
It's called like The Adventures of Han Solo, I think, or something like that. John Williams did that.
Okay.
The rest of the soundtrack is John Powell.
Okay.
But yeah, he incorporated a lot of he incorporated a lot of like classic trilogy cues in the music, which I appreciated. And I think I mentioned I said this a couple times. I've went in with low expectations of this movie, but I came out of it wanting a sequel. So to me, that was a win. This movie did its job.
Awesome.
I don't know if we want to get into this now or maybe later, but generally speaking, how do you feel this stacks up to other Star Wars films? Like, where might it fall in your list?
I think it might be 6th.
Okay.
Maybe 5th. I enjoyed it, but Last Jedi, Force Awakens, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi are always going to be like those top 4, but I did enjoy it more than Rogue One. I loved the story of Rogue One. Don't get me wrong. It was a great story. It was really great acting, and I enjoyed it. But this was a lot of fun. And
yeah,
I like fun more than I like people dying.
Yeah, Rogue One can get a little depressing.
It was a little sad at the end. Like, everyone dies. Sorry. Oh, that was a spoiler. But not like a recent spoiler.
I'll leave that one in because I'm hoping by the people that listen to this have presumably watched the other Star Wars films.
If you haven't watched Rogue One by now, you don't deserve to listen to this podcast. Sorry. Not sorry.
Way to alienate half our listener base. Sorry. And by half, I mean 5 people. Yeah, I agree. I think it's somewhere middle of the road for me. It is hard to crack into that top 3 or 4 with a lot of, especially like, I think Last Jedi is up there for me. Force Awakens is up there for me. Empire is obviously up there for me. I might even put Rogue One up there for me because I do really like what that one did. I know a lot of people that love the classic trilogy are always putting A New Hope up there. I really think now, compared to other modern movies, A New Hope is great for setting up the world and world building and introducing people to the franchise, but it can get slow compared to some of these other movies with the pacing and stuff like that. I think Rogue One actually does a really good job of keeping the pace up and keeping you invested and interested in the movie.
Right.
So I might actually put that above A New Hope for me.
Mm-hmm.
But somewhere after that, Solo falls in. It's definitely above the prequels.
Oh, yeah.
So
not that there isn't such good adventures in the prequels. Like, there are some good adventures in there, and if without that, we wouldn't have the Clone Wars, and so we do appreciate them in their own special way.
Yeah, normally I'm one of the defenders of the prequels. Mm-hmm. I understand there are certain things that are just terrible about them, but they serve a purpose. They are intended to build more of the story and flesh stuff out, and I will defend that every time.
Right.
So we are not bashing the prequels here.
No.
They're just, as preferences, they are lower on our list.
Right.
All right. I don't know if there's anything else non-spoiler, because I know we're kind of itching to get into spoilers, but more or less, if you haven't seen this movie, even regardless of what we think, I highly recommend just going to see it. I kind of preach that every time we talk about movies. Like, our opinion is one thing, your opinion may completely differ from ours. So if you are even on the fence of this, just go see the movie and form your own opinion and see if you agree with what we've talked about or will talk about. And feel free to yell in your car whenever you're listening to this if you disagree with us.
I agree to your agreement.
All right, so from this point moving forward, we will be discussing spoilers and plot details for Solo. So if you haven't seen the film, pause this now, come back to us after seeing it. Or if you don't mind being spoiled, feel free to listen on, and we will continue to ruin the movie for you. So this is your last warning. Spoilers to follow.
Wee-oo, wee-oo, spoiler! Wee-oo, wee-oo, spoiler! You know, something like that.
All right, so we are into spoiler territory. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel like the best place to start with this is the biggest fucking surprise cameo that this movie had in store that I had no idea was coming, but it blew my mind.
Awesome. Maul.
So excited. It's one of those things I think, maybe because I've seen Marvel try to do like these interconnected worlds between TV and movies, and then when you start watching the TV side of it, you realize, no, these are not connected. They don't give a shit what the movies are doing.
Right.
So having Solo acknowledge stuff that has happened in the TV series and the cartoons, that somehow hit home for me, and I never would have expected them to do that, just because maybe Marvel has trained me one way, but this has proven to me that the story group at Lucasfilm knows what exactly they're doing, and they have a plan for all this stuff, and they make it work, and I thought it was fucking fantastic.
It all has to run through, like, Pablo Hidalgo. It has to. Like,
yes,
I feel like he's the secret voice, like, breathing in everyone's ear. But, yeah, I thought I'm always on Twitter, you know, Brian. I, like, read Twitter like crazy. Nobody cares that I'm on Twitter, but I read everyone else's Twitter. But people were on there like, wait a minute, wasn't he dead? Like, didn't he die? We saw him die. And I'm like, no, he's alive.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, he was at that point.
Because one of my buddies that went and saw it with me, that's the first thing he said to me, was like, isn't he dead? Like, how is this possible? Is this somebody else that just looks like him? Is this Maul? I'm like, no, that's him. Like, that, you got to watch the cartoons for that.
Yes.
And even I think Josh, actually, after he saw the movie, was sort of questioning me about that too. Like, didn't he die? And, you know, you try to give people the summary of what has happened in Rebels and Clone Wars to be like, this is where he's at, and this is what's happening. Right. And I know my one buddy that saw it with me opening night keeps saying, like, well, I need that explained. So I feel like if they put Maul in something else, they almost need to give him some sort of exposition or monologue explaining what has happened to him in the years prior to that. Because the casual fans that just see the movies, you're right, they have no idea what the fuck's going on and are really confused by that scene. Mm-hmm. But for us that watch all that stuff, that was a big fucking deal.
Yeah. And maybe it'll get some people to watch the Clone Wars, and maybe it'll get some people really interested in Rebels. Because here we are sitting back going, ha ha, we've been telling you to watch this stuff all along. And you're like, no, I don't watch cartoons. Like, it's animated series.
Right.
It's an animated series, and it's very good, and it's written very well, and we reap the rewards because we know that Maul was alive at that point. So,
and I think that was what stuck out to me is when they show the hooded figure in the hologram. It's meant to be a misdirect. I think you're meant to think it's Palpatine,
mm-hmm.
But just from the voice, I'm like, that's Sam Witwer. That I could tell that was him doing Maul,
right?
And it still didn't click. Like, I was still like, no, they wouldn't do that. And then when the hood comes off, I'm like, oh shit, they did it.
And it is actually the voice actor from the Clone Wars, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Sam Witwer did. He actually did voice the Emperor in the Clone Wars and Maul in the Clone Wars, and then reprised Maul for Rebels.
Okay. Yeah, it was great seeing him. A great ending.
And I'll tell you what though, because there were people in the theater with me, and I've only seen it once, but there were people in the theater with me when that reveal happened. The people lost their shit. And I couldn't hear the dialogue of that scene, like what they were talking about and what was going on. So I still want to see it again almost for that reason too, just to pick up what I missed.
Right.
Because I think, for the people that are caught up with the cartoons and stuff, or maybe even for anyone that's listening to this that hasn't watched that stuff, maybe between the two of us, Paula, we can sort of summarize what's been going on with Maul.
Sure.
So if people need that explanation. So yes, Maul is alive. After being cut in half, the top half of his body is I guess, more or less sustained by pure hatred for Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he somehow lives through all that. Somehow fashions himself
Spider legs.
some big mechanical legs. He ends up on a junkyard planet, barely sane. And it isn't until she's his mother, right? I think Mother Talzin was.
I think his brother
mother
finds him.
Right, but I think Mother Talzin sends Savage Opress to find him.
Yes.
So yeah, there's another. Savage Opress is Darth Maul's brother, looks the same, but has different paint on his face and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is sent by the Night Sisters of Dathomir, which we hear, I think, that planet mentioned. I think Maul does mention Dathomir in this movie. I think that's where he says that's where he is.
Yes. Leading the groups, the criminal groups.
Yeah, I can't think of that. Crimson something?
Crimson. Oh, I wrote it down.
Shit.
Crimson Dawn.
Crimson Dawn, yes.
And it just so happens he's, crimson in color, so.
Oh, very good,
maybe,
yeah.
That's a tie-in.
Yeah, so Savage finds him on, basically damn near insane on this planet, brings him back to Dathomir and their mother, and then she fixes his mind where he becomes basically sane and sort of put back together, and then gives him better mechanical legs.
Right.
So he becomes a full person again, sort of. And at that point, he just wants to wreak havoc. His one sole mission at that point is to go after Obi-Wan Kenobi. And it becomes, I forget which, it had to have been season 5, I think, of Clone Wars, when it finally comes to a head. Maul starts to gain power and form criminal enterprises, eventually leading a criminal side of the Mandalorians called Death Watch.
And he kill the head of Death Watch with the black
Jon Favreau's character.
the black saber.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Why I can't Priz Vizsla or
Pre Vizsla.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Maul takes over Death Watch, has the dark saber, which then the dark saber actually comes into play in Rebels. That's a whole other storyline. But at that point, gets the attention of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Kenobi goes after Maul on Mandalore. Maul kills the woman that Obi-Wan, we assume, loved.
Satine.
Yes.
She was leading Mandalore at the time.
Yes. So their fight came to a head, but not finished there. And as Maul is doing all these criminal deeds and sort of making a name for himself, he catches the attention of Darth Sidious, who realizes this guy's getting a little bit too powerful for my taste. He might screw up my plans, and faces Savage Opress and Darth Maul at the same time in a fucking awesome lightsaber battle.
Mm-hmm.
And finally takes out Savage Opress and leaves Maul wounded and broken again. And that's where we left him off for Clone Wars.
Right.
And I think there's a 4 or 5 issue comic that takes place after that is considered canon, where I think Darth Maul gets imprisoned and some of the remnants of Death Watch break him out. And after he's broken out, he starts to, again, build up some sort of criminal side and stuff like that. So I think Rebels takes place, 15, 20 years after that. So we meet him in this movie between those 2 series. And this is before he shows up in Rebels, when he's still the head of these criminal organizations. So I don't really know what his end goal is here. But he's, trying to consolidate power and do something. He's got to have some end goal with these criminal organizations, but I don't even know if I know what that is, or if we know what that is.
I think he has such a distaste for the Empire as much as he does Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Right.
So I'm sure it's to kind of put a dent in the Empire's, ways without being so heroic like the rebellion is. He's kind of on the dark end of it. So
right. Yeah, because even I think the lightsaber that he ignites in Solo looks like, I think, the lightsaber he has in Rebels, which looks like the remnants of a Inquisitor lightsaber.
Yes, because it kind of has that round middle to it.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So anybody who wants to know what happens to Darth Maul after all of this, you should watch all 4 seasons of Rebels. It's amazing.
Yeah, so we gave you the jumping off part to get you up to Solo, but there are other... Solo covers this gap. There's a gap of I don't know, 10 or 15 years of Maul's story between Clone Wars and Rebels that we don't know what happened. So if they start putting him in live action film, we might be able to fill in that gap, or I don't know what their plan is for Maul, whether we're going to see him in movies or if it's going to be comic books or novels or something that's going to flesh out that time period for him. But they obviously have a plan for him and what they're going to do.
Well, I think you just can't tease us with Maul because he's one of those, he really didn't get the credit he deserved at the end of 3.
Yeah.
So I feel that him being teased is kind of like a fan favorite villain. Maybe goes back to those rumors of having more solo movies, which would be great.
And that's the other thing too, is I don't know where they would go with him from here, because if they set him up in a movie, he almost seems a little bit out of place if he would show up in a solo sequel. I don't feel like I see Han Solo taking on Darth Maul. Maybe
in a Boba Fett movie.
Maybe. Like I could see him working with Boba Fett or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he fits more at home in the Obi-Wan movie that's been rumored. However, if you've watched Rebels, that storyline ends with Obi-Wan in Rebels.
Right.
So they've already done what I would like to see in a live-action movie in the cartoon. I don't think they're going to rehash that.
Right. I think that in Solo they did a lot with the underbelly and the seedy parts of Star Wars.
Right.
And I think that that needs to continue. We enjoyed seeing that.
Yeah. So I feel like what they're trying to do with Maul is, I don't know, like if they were going to do the sequel, try to have him as this head of this criminal organization, and if they set it up where Han has to go after him, I feel like him encountering some sort of Force wielder or Sith prior to meeting him in A New Hope kind of throws the character for a loop.
Because he says, to Han, or not Han, he says to Luke he doesn't believe in any of that mumbo jumbo.
Right.
So
it's almost like he's playing it as if he hasn't seen it or experienced it ever before.
Right.
So that line of dialogue specifically is what I'm hinging that on.
Mm-hmm.
Is that I'm not sure if they will cross paths.
Yeah. I think that if we do see Maul again, I mean, I really enjoyed seeing this seedy underside of the Star Wars universe. It wasn't, it wasn't primarily all about the rebels. It wasn't primarily all about, the first, the Empire.
Right.
It was all of the underbelly of it all. So it would probably have something more to do with, Boba Fett, or like we were talking about, maybe bounty hunters or the crime organizations, that we would see him again, which I wouldn't be upset. Maul the movie.
Yeah. It'd be nice to see if I'm wondering if they're teeing him up to have another solo movie, not solo movie, but Maul have his own standalone movie.
Yeah.
That would be something I think would be fun to see.
Mm-hmm.
I'd actually rather see that, I think, over a Boba Fett movie.
And they could pull things that maybe we've already seen in, the animated series. Maybe they pull that and make it into the live action.
Oh, so kind of retell the same story, or?
Yeah, because like you and I were saying, it's a lot of people have not seen, the Clone Wars or Rebels or things like that. So maybe they want to know more of the backstory without watching 6 seasons of Clone Wars and 4 seasons of Rebels. So
I mean, I'd love to see some of that stuff play out in live action. I don't think they'd retell it, but I could see them doing a movie in that gray area where Maul exists, but we don't know what he's doing. And I mean, even if they wanted to, not that they've done this, I think, with either the definitely Rogue One, they didn't do it, and they didn't do it in Solo either, but they didn't have the opening crawl.
Yeah, they didn't.
But if you set up the Maul movie and you need to sort of fill people in, that opening crawl, I think, that's your exposition right there.
Right.
Give the crawl explaining what's happened to him and where he's at, and then kick the story off. Instead of, I think that would actually work better than leaving it as some sort of big, long monologue that he has to tell someone so they understand as the audience, what's going on with him.
I think, though, the Solo story is kind of picking on a lot of stories, old books or old comics or things like that, and it's pulling pieces from that. So a mall movie could be just kind of like that, like picking and choosing what they wanted to, pull from an animated series into the movie.
I feel like that's slightly different only because the books and stuff that I feel like the Solo movie is drawing from is no longer considered canon.
Okay.
So they're picking and choosing what they want to make officially canon. And since Clone Wars and Rebels are canon, it's not like you can sort of pick and choose what exists in that world and what doesn't, since it's already considered part of that world.
That's true. You'd have to be really true to the story since
Right.
it's already
That's like
Disney.
as much as
It's already PD.
as much as if they do an Obi-Wan standalone movie and Maul is somehow a part of that, they'd have to have that battle play out exactly the same way you see it in Rebels. They can't make it more
Right.
stylized or something, because then that contradicts what you saw in the TV show.
Right. And then we'd all be angry
Right. Yeah.
fanboys.
Trying to think where we want to go from here. I have like bullet point just questions and stuff like that, but some of the stuff I think I mentioned earlier, non-spoilery, that there was certain locations and stuff that has been mentioned in lore, but we finally get to see on screen. Like seeing Corellia was a big
Yes.
thing for me. That's some place that's always been talked about but never seen on screen, so that was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to see the famed Kessel Run play out, which is a big midpoint of the movie. What did you think of that section?
I thought that was really interesting. When it's like a spice mining community,
Yeah.
and I don't know what to expect whenever. I mean, I have this big book of Star Wars lands that I could have referenced, so I knew what I was walking into. But it was, even though it was dark, it was fun.
Yeah.
Like, you knew what was coming, but you didn't know how it was going to happen.
True.
But, no, it was really interesting to see those planets. And, anytime there's a Star Wars movie, I always expect to see pretty worlds, and these worlds were not pretty.
Yeah.
Like, it's from Crate, which is white on red, to Hoth, which is so, winter white, and like Endor, which is nice and green. And these were like dirty, yucky planets. Like, I would not want to be on those planets. So they were really interesting, like you were saying, to see.
Yeah, it was definitely the dark and gritty side of... And I've heard this compared to a lot of like a Western tone, and I definitely get that from this movie.
Yeah. The chase with the elevated train kind of.
Yeah.
Like, even though it was kind of like just gray on white, it was really interesting, like beautiful to see. It was pretty cool.
A train heist, which is like a staple for every Western.
Yes. What was the last planet they were? Severin?
Tell you the truth, I don't remember.
It was like the desert world.
Right. Yeah, that's the one I can't remember.
They were on it. I'm like, this feels like a Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome of look to it too.
Yeah, I think with the Kessel Run, I feel like I don't know if it's just thinking of other lore or stuff, but I always assumed it was some sort of race. Like, and I don't know if, like, the 12 parsecs thing, I guess you always assume that's a limit of time. Like, that's a quick time for whatever it is. But this movie sets it up that it's actually a distance. You can only go through that I guess what they call it, the maw.
Maelstrom? Oh, the maw.
You can only go through that a certain way that ends up being 24 parsecs in a distance. But he took a shortcut, and that's why it's 12 parsecs instead of 24.
Right. And that's probably like a good assumption to have, is that it would have been a race, because that's what, I mean, especially in Bloodlines, that's what Han is off doing.
And I think maybe that's where I took that leap too, is the other lore seems like he's an experienced racer, but we never really get, even in this movie, a sense that he is part of some sort of racing culture.
Yeah. I never really thought about it. I guess it's one of those things you just take for granted. It's like, he made the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. Well, who hasn't?
Right.
No, that's really interesting to think about.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder how long it takes for that sort of story to go around, because even after he does it, he tries to tell people about it, and no one seems like to give a shit.
So while they're in that maelstrom or the maw, and they come across like that big giant creature, and you'll have to, like, that was the scene, right? Where they're coming
Yes,
back from.
yeah.
Okay. So Aaron and I had a very big conversation about he thinks that it's a Purgle in there.
Oh, okay.
That creature is a Purgle because there was like electrical things coming off of it, and it kind of had that look. And we don't know if Purgle are kind of friendly or not. We've only seen them with Ezra Bridger,
Right.
and he has that like Jedi connection to them.
Right.
So, but
Ooh, that'd be interesting. I didn't actually put that together.
He brought that up to me, and I'm like, that is super smart.
Yeah. Now I really want to see it again and try to pay closer attention to that. Because I don't know if do you really even get a good shot of what that creature is?
No, you get, well, at the end, whenever they jettison the escape pod.
Oh, yeah,
and then the Millennium Falcon really becomes the Millennium Falcon, and which is a total spoiler that my Lego.
See, Lego has a habit of spoiling all kinds of shit.
Yep, they sent me I got my Lego Millennium Falcon, and on the back it's like, look what jettisons out, and I'm like, oh, I'm probably not supposed to know that.
I still remember hearing about the Lego sets from Civil War that had smaller Lego figures and then a giant man that spoils that entire fight sequence from Civil War.
But it's you can actually see a lot of it whenever they pan out and they show the escape pod jettisoning towards the hole, and he's trying to come out of the hole.
Right. Yeah, it gets like its skin ripped off it or something.
I think it's too small to be a Sarlacc, so he was right when he was saying it's probably a Purgle, which are huge, giant squid whales.
Yeah, I think the Sarlaccs are like, at least the one we've seen before, is some sort of pit. So I wouldn't even think it's some sort of creature outside of something like that.
Yeah, that's true.
But the Purgle, yeah, I didn't think about that. I didn't really put two and two together. I feel like it was more squiddy than the Purgle, but maybe I'm overthinking it.
I'll try to find a picture so we can get a little bit more clarification on that. But that was really interesting. Shout out to my husband.
Good job, Aaron. I think you're onto something there. This is assuming he listens and gets the shout out. If not, you can tell him it's in there.
He's your fourth listener.
Nice. I'll get him a badge made up. We talked a little bit about Alden and Donald's performances, but do we want to go into any of that any more specifically?
No, I mean, you were talking about like Donald Glover being perfectly cast, and I agree. That was amazing.
There were times I feel like he hit that deep voice that Billy Dee has and just is inflected in dialogue the way Billy Dee does, and I was like, this is amazing. And
he was calling him Han instead of Han.
Yeah.
But I think also the actor who played Chewbacca just, come on, he's a big furry thing that like screams and makes noises, but you're still like, yeah, you totally connect with him.
Yeah. Yeah, I should know his name, and I can't think. It's like Sotamo. Junis.
Wow, there's a lot of consonants and vowels in his name. Getting it wrong.
Yeah.
I know Woody Harrelson's a great actor, but I was like, in Star Wars, but he was. Was pretty.
I like how they made him like that gunslinger.
Yes.
Like him flipping around the guns and all that stuff. I wasn't ready for it, and I thought that was really, really cool.
I was reading a lot about how he was, like, in the movie, Beckett is the inspiration for Han Solo.
Yeah.
So you get Han Solo because of Beckett. That was his kind of role model.
Right. One thing that I read somewhere that, I forget what site it was that pointed out to me, and I noticed it in the movie, but it didn't click until I read the article. Han's blaster that he gets.
Mm-hmm.
I never really thought about the scope on the blaster. One, that it has such a long scope. And two, that it's on the right side of the gun when Han is right-handed. You'd think if he's right-handed, it should be on the left side of the gun so he can look down the scope when firing.
Okay.
But he gets the gun from Beckett. Beckett favors his left hand, which means the scope is on the right side. And also, it has a scope because it is a part of some sort of sniper rifle configuration, which Beckett disassembles and then hands him the blaster. So I thought that was really cool.
That is really cool. It's those things that you don't think about until you start digging in and reading about it and learning about it, and then you're like, okay, now I got to see it again.
Yeah.
Because it's so important. Those little things are so important to Star Wars fans. Anyway.
Yeah, there was a lot of. I don't know. Do you want to segue into Easter egg stuff since I feel like we're veering into that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I only have a couple, maybe 4.
Okay.
That I grabbed. You said you started making a list, so I'll try to go through mine. One of the obvious ones that I saw was Beckett's wearing Lando's disguise from Return of the Jedi.
Oh yeah, the Gondar Tusk helmet.
Was that the official name for it? I
That's
didn't even know the name.
the official name of it. The Gondar Tusk helmet.
So I thought that was cool, and that was a nice little, not callback, I guess, because this happens before, but nice to see that take a place. Beckett casually dropping Aura Singh.
Yes.
That he apparently killed her.
Lando said Tobias Beckett did him a favor.
Oh, so are we led to believe Aura Singh was after Lando?
I believe so.
Ooh, okay.
Well, apparently she was in the pod race in Phantom Menace. Like,
right.
She was in that scene. And she's also made a couple of appearances in the Clone Wars.
She was sort of like mentoring Boba Fett.
Yeah.
And this is, I don't know if this is official or not. This is my recollection of it. So I haven't been able to compare them. But I think the move that Beckett makes against Chewie on the hollow chest board is the same move that R2 makes against Chewie in A New Hope that gets them all pissed off.
Yeah, I think I read that somewhere because Han's like, he could tear, you should let him win because he's going to tear someone's arms off. Because he actually saw him tear someone's arms off.
Yes. And the last one I have, and this is the one that actually brought a smile on my face because I don't know if many people would grab this, but when they go into the mines of Kessel and Karai goes to the headmaster and they go into his office or whatever and she subdues him and then someone mentions how'd you do that? And she mentions Teras Kazi.
Yes.
Which is a fighting style that was made up for a PS1 video game that I own and I love even though it gets so much shit. But that game was awesome. So the fact that they suddenly made that canon and talked about it in the movie, I thought that was fantastic. I
did write that down too. And it was also practiced by Darth Maul and the Praetorian Guard, apparently.
Oh, see, I did not know that.
That was in the last... it's one of the last Jedi books that I bought.
Oh, the guides to...
Yeah, that digs into all of the characters and lands and worlds and things like that.
I think those are all that I have written down, so I'm anxious to hear what you found.
I sent you something earlier about the Mimban, the mud world.
Yeah.
But it was originally mentioned in the first Star Wars novel, Splinter of the Mind's Eye.
Oh, okay.
But it has been mentioned in, again, the Clone Wars. It was mentioned.
See, the screenshot you sent me with the
tweet.
Yeah, I didn't even remember those scenes in Clone Wars.
See, you're not on Twitter as much as I am.
Apparently not.
The things that I see. But it was just a little clip of what they mentioned it quickly on a radio station or that they were listening to in the Clone Wars. But that was really cool. We talked a little bit about Lando, and there's some references to I don't know that they're called the Calrissian Chronicles or the Calrissian Adventures from 1983, but a lot of things that he was doing in the movie was coming from those chronicles.
Okay.
The Battle of Felucia. I'm going to say that wrong. It's Felucia. And Lando briefly mentions this planet Takira, but it was an important battle during the Clone Wars, and it was an episode with Obi-Wan and Anakin and Ahsoka.
I think that's the planet where we see... oh shit, what the hell's her name? The Twilight Jedi get killed in Order 66. I think that's Felucia.
Oh, okay.
The really like teal green looking big flowers planet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I only know that because I think it was the Battlefront 2 video game for original Xbox. I think that was a playable planet that you could go to. I think that's why I know that.
I never in a million years would have remembered that had I not read the article. And I'm like, what is that? But we talked about Hans Dice. They're seen in The Last Jedi, and briefly in A New Hope.
Are they in A New Hope?
That's, I believe, they're shown in The Millennium Falcon.
Really? I'll have to watch for that, because that's not something I thought. I thought they added that after the fact.
Oh, really?
I didn't think it was there since, the originals in 77.
That's an easy Google fix.
Yeah.
You can just Google that. The Coronet Spaceport was a key location in Star Wars Old Republic.
Ooh, okay.
Lots of Jabba the Hutt references. How Beckett wants to go to Tatooine, and that's his next job, to go work for the Hutt family, smuggle for them, but we know that doesn't happen.
So we assume that's Jabba, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Rio mentions a Minoc roast, which I thought was hilarious.
Oh.
I heard that in the movie, and I'm like, I know what that means. Let's see. There's Imperial probe droids on the train that are the same kind of droids that are seen on Hoth.
Oh, okay. I missed that then too.
One of the things I wrote down was Lando said that he hates mining colonies, like when they're on Kessel and it's there, and he ends up having his own mining colony on Cloud City.
Well, that's like the reversal of Han saying, "I have a really good feeling about this."
Yeah.
Which every other time that line of dialogue is, I have a bad feeling about this in every other Star Wars movie.
Let's see. Oh, the Lando Han line, "I hate you, I know."
Yeah.
was definitely a throwback to "I love you, I know." Or a front throw, maybe, since this is for... And, of course, Han shot first.
Definitely. That is definitive in this movie, yes.
I don't know if we could totally call that an Easter egg, but if, you don't know the whole story about who shot first.
He doesn't even let Beckett finish a sentence, and he takes him out.
And apparently Anthony Daniels was Tak the Wookiee. That,
Oh, I did read that. Yes.
Yeah.
He's the one that Chewie kind of like rubs heads with before they depart.
That was Anthony Daniels. And, the guy who played the Wookiee, or not the Wookiee, the guy who was in, the little guy.
Warwick Davis.
Yes, he was in the movie too, but I can't remember what his role was.
He was one of the guys with the crew at the end.
Okay. I missed that.
I don't know if he had a name, but he was definitely there.
I do believe that is all I have for Easter eggs.
Okay, you found some good ones.
Thank you.
I want to kind of loop back to, I guess, performances. What did you think of the other... We talked about Alden, Donald, and Woody Harrelson. What about everybody else? What do you think of how everybody else did?
I don't think there was enough Tandy Newton, to be honest.
Yeah.
I love her. And I'm like, she's blowing herself up? That's not enough. That was just not enough time for that crew for me.
Yeah.
I wanted more Rio. I wanted more Val. What did you think? Did you want more of that crew? Were you surprised when they both died?
I was, yeah. I really thought they'd make it out of there, especially because I felt like Thandie Newton, I felt like anyway, was more part of the marketing more. So I think I expected her to last a little bit longer in the movie. And I really expected, regardless of what they were saying her name was, I actually kind of expected her to be... Do you read or keep up with any of the comic book storylines or no?
No, not really.
So in the 7th or 8th, it was early on in the run of the Star Wars comic when they rebooted it. there was a African American character who showed up claiming to be Han Solo's wife.
Oh.
And I kind of assumed it was going to be Thandie Newton, like they were going to lay the seeds for her to be that character that would just show up later on in the comic book, but they didn't go that route. So I was waiting for her to, like, for the name that they were putting in the marketing to be like an alias, and her actual name was going to be, I think it's like Sansa. I think it was Sansa Solo was her name. But yeah, I expected that throughway to happen. So there's obviously something else now that happens in Han's story where he sort of gets married at some point. But, I mean, in the comic, to him, he's not married. It was just something that they did, like, on a job that didn't mean anything, just to get from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. But she took it a little bit too far.
Interesting.
As far as the other characters, I think Paul Bettany, plays a good bad guy. I liked him.
He does. And was he not originally in the first, cut of it? He was brought in later on. Yes,
there was, I can't remember the guy's name, but there was a African-American guy cast as that character with when Phil Lord and Chris Miller did it, and then because of the reshoots that they had to do, scheduling, he couldn't do it, so they had to recast him with Paul Bettany.
That's insane.
Yeah.
He was a pretty creepy guy. I don't think they gave him enough screen time, but it really wasn't his story, so I totally get it.
Yeah.
Maybe when we get it on DVD.
And I wouldn't be surprised if they released like a comic about his character, just some sort of criminal underbelly story, that like a 4-issue thing if they wanted to. I could definitely see that being a thing.
Paul Bettany is creepy without extra makeup.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he was creepy. I loved L3.
Yes. Yeah, that was the next one.
So I've read an article about how the actress was actually... It was kind of like a C-3PO thing. She was on set. She was in some type of like robotic costume to do that. And a lot of her lines that were in the movie were just kind of on the spot. She made them up. And it was hilarious. The one where she's asked, like, what do you want? And she's like, equal rights. Laughed so loud.
The robot revolution was great.
Yes, it was. Some of the droids in there that you've seen a couple of the droids before, and you're like, oh, I do want to see it. The boxy one, the one that looks like an upside down trash can.
Gonk droid.
Yes.
I love how that sequence just like spirals so quickly out of control. Like she takes the restraining bolt off one R2 unit, and the rest is just compounds free after that.
When she has the girl talk with Kira, it's just you and I. We can talk. Can we talk? Or talk, coffee talk. It was hilarious.
How Lando loves her, and they'll just try to make it work.
Yeah, she's, I think Lando really did love her.
There was definitely a relationship or some connection there.
But she, as a droid, apparently she was a self-made droid who had astromech parts, and she put herself together. Just like a good woman should. Gotta put yourself together.
And I really liked the, it brought a whole new perspective to the Falcon when she kind of goes and they put her, I guess, like, mind in the Falcon. Mm-hmm. So all those times in the later movie, in the original trilogy and stuff like that, when they talk about trying to talk to the Falcon, you're thinking it's just them talking to a computer system, but they're actually talking to what's remaining of L3 that's in the Falcon. And looking at that at a whole new perspective, I thought it was really, really cool.
That is really awesome. Star Wars movies are the best. The girl who plays Enfys Nest, like, that whole role was very simple. Like, I didn't expect her to take off a mask and be, like, that young.
Oh, yeah,
that girl's like 12.
The Marauders.
Yes.
Yeah.
I liked that storyline as well, because you really did think that they were part of that, those gangs and things that. So that was a nice little twist that I appreciated. And the actress who played her, I was like, oh, she's probably like not old enough to drive.
What about Karai? I don't know if we really dove into her.
She I don't know. I don't know if I have like true feelings about her. I think that like I was surprised at the end when she was, you know, talking to Maul and she's like, "Wow, just, you know, she killed Dryden Voss and she's taking over the role now." And at the end, whenever she kind of double crossed Han and, you know, you kind of knew she was going to take on that role.
Right.
That was pretty interesting. I don't know. The actress wasn't very memorable.
Okay.
To me. Not like Daisy Ridley.
Yeah.
Not like, you know, Rogue One. Who's the actress's name who I can't remember?
Felicity Jones.
Yes.
Yeah, I think she did a good job. I'm curious to see if they dive into her either in a sequel or some other extended universe canon thing to figure out what happened over that 3 years where she's sort of like getting under Voss's wing, kind of.
Yes. What did she do? Because she kind of alludes to that.
Right. She never says anything. Mm-hmm. We never find out what that is or what she's done. So that's a story to be told if they decide to do that. And if they do a sequel, I think she has to show back up.
Right. Yeah, because what do you have to do to become Dryden Voss's like number 2?
Yeah.
Or number 1, I should say.
Yeah.
So, kind of maybe underestimate what she can do.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they decide to do with her or where she pops up again.
I think we should get an honorable mention to Lando Calrissian's cloaks, his capes.
He has a whole closet full of capes.
That was amazing. And I guess we should say like the Millennium Falcon was its own character.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Seeing it brand shiny new and white was amazing.
And it did go to shit pretty quickly. It was like that one instance through the Kessel Run and that was it. Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing, even like if they do a sequel, just seeing Han kind of like slowly piece it back together and put the dual guns, one up top, one below, like the quad guns that are on there. I think that'd be cool to see. He's got to replace the radar dish. I think that flew off too.
You know, the Millennium Falcon, it just shows up randomly in places. It's like here, now it's here.
Right.
But like, especially in The Force Awakens, when it ends up on Jakku, like, how is it on Jakku?
That's a story that needs to be told too, yeah.
Yes. I would read that story, I would watch that story.
Were there any characters that were missing? I think we've pretty much touched on everybody.
Yes, and I did look up the original Darth Maul actor did play him. I think his name was Paul...
Ray Park.
Yes.
Yes.
He actually did play Maul, and then it was voiced by the Clone Wars Rebels.
Sam Witwer.
Yeah.
Yes. You kind of feel bad for Ray Park. He portrays the character, but can't ever have any speaking lines because they dub him over every time.
Yeah. He's and Darth Maul's so eloquent too.
Yeah.
It's like that British kind of soft tone, but can be angry at the same time. He's just elegant.
I just thought it was such a cool connection that they actually used the Sam Witwer who voiced him in the TV show to actually use him in the movie.
Yes.
That's a call to the big leagues for him. Let's sort of spin it with anything that kind of bugged you or that you didn't like about the movie.
You know, Brian, I'm that kind of positive person where it's really hard for me to find anything negative. I think the only thing, like maybe we touched upon, I didn't realize that how maybe unemotional Kira was, but maybe that was just her character, and that was the drive is, you know, she's been through some shit, so...
Yeah, I could see that being a character choice for her in the movie. Because she knows, I think, if she gets too close to Han, that she could fall right back into it. And
she almost did.
Yeah.
So I can totally see how, like, she emotionally had to separate herself from that so she can stay on the path that she's been doing for the last 3 years.
Right.
I think really that was it. I just enjoyed all of it. Was there anything that was bothering you that you weren't?
I feel like there was more at the time that stuck out to me, and I can't think of too much. The one thing that really kind of bugs me and still does that I can remember is the throwaway way that he gets his last name.
Oh, yeah.
I really irritated me. There was just some Imperial officer like, oh, you're by yourself, so you're Solo. Oh, the last name, gotcha. Like, it's so... It's such a... It reminds me a lot of how, like, Darth Vader gets his name from Episode 3, where, like, Sidious just kind of pulls that out of thin air for no apparent fucking reason. And it's supposed to have some sort of gravitas and weight. Han Solo is... I mean, that's the persona he's going with. That's who we know and love from the original trilogy. So I feel like having that name from the beginning is something that, I don't know, should have been almost had some, or if they give it to him during the course of the movie, I feel like it had needed to have more like pomp and circumstance to it than just some guy like, well, we're just going to pull this name out of thin air and give it to you.
I feel like a lot of Star Wars characters don't have last names though, like Rey. And Finn. Like, a lot of them don't. But it was funny because there's a parody account on Twitter called Emo Kylo Ren.
Right.
And as soon as the next day, the movie, it just came out the next day, Emo Kylo Ren was like, so we're going to make fun of my name? Hashtag Solo. So, that wasn't, it was like anticlimactic.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. So that kind of bugged me.
Because it's not like he didn't know his family, because he did reference his father in the movie.
Right. So now it's like, well, if they want to, they could tell a story of what his actual name is, or have that be a reveal sometime later on, and maybe that has some importance. But
maybe he didn't want to give his real name.
Yeah, I don't know. But it's like if you do the misdirect like that, then now you have someone somewhere, even me, kind of, is going to be curious what his actual name is. Because we were all assumed that Han Solo is his name. That's period. Not an alias. And to make it some sort of alias sort of persona that he... Not even a persona, but I don't know. It makes me look at the character differently in a way that I don't want to look at differently, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And the only thing I think... The other thing that sort of irritated me, but I think it sort of got explained away once I started looking at what the timeline was. Because the way they sort of end this movie, you're left to assume that Han and Chewie are going to Tatooine to take the job from Jabba.
Right.
And if... Part of me, when I first saw it, I started thinking, oh, well, this sort of leads up right to A New Hope. But when you meet Han and Chewie in A New Hope, you're left to assume that there's this big backstory kind of history with them. Like, they've been through some shit, they've taken a lot of jobs, and the movie almost seems like they were together for a week, and then, whoop, we're into A New Hope. But, like I said, when I finally looked at what the timeline was, this is looking at like 10 years before A New Hope.
So they could have done multiple jobs for Jabba.
So they still have time. And I really think, assuming we get a sequel, I'd love to see a sequel, but like my idea for a sequel would be you set the first act up where they're taking jobs from Jabba, and all those jobs are going successfully. The second act is when they take the job that they famously screw up. Mm-hmm. And then the third act is when you introduce Boba Fett, sent by Jabba to go after them.
I would watch that.
Because I think that... Because there's obviously... Han and Boba Fett have some sort of a history. That's hinted at in the original trilogy, too.
Right.
So you have to see something like that, I think, play out in one of these movies. So to introduce him as the adversary to Han, and they could have their big sort of run-in where Han escapes, but Boba maybe still has this grudge or something against him. And I really don't even think you need a Boba Fett movie. I think you put Boba Fett in the Han Solo sequel, and I think that's the way to go.
I was just thinking of that, like, kind of like an Iron Man, Captain America feel to it, where it's kind of like both their stories.
Yeah. I'd be okay with that.
Like a Civil War type of feel to it, yeah. Because, I mean, we do know a lot about Boba.
Yeah, and those are details that I almost don't know if I wanted to know from the prequels. Like, they're part of it now, and I'm okay with it, like what they set up and stuff like that, but Boba Fett works so much better as a mysterious character that just kind of shows up like the Terminator just to fuck shit up and leave. I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what else was there. Oh, so just sort of maybe spinning off of the sequel idea. Assuming there will be sequels, because we don't really know how this is going to play out with what it's making and if they have other plans for other movies. Like I said, I think Alden is signed up for 3. So if they want to do a trilogy, they probably could.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything in your mind that you would like to see in a sequel? Where would you like to see this story go?
Well, like we were saying, I would definitely, their adventures like Chewie and Han, running around the galaxy. Because right now we don't have any like Jedi interference. Like the Jedi are pretty much
right
done. So we really don't get a lot of that. So it would just be kind of like those adventure stories, kind of like an Indiana Jones feel where they're doing like different jobs and bringing in that, underneath it all kind of quality where it's not all happy endings and rainbows and butterflies and Jedi and magic, and it kind of takes, because we're coming up on like 6-7 movies with, Rebels and the Empire and then the First Order. So it kind of feels like, it's the same thing over and over again, where this has such a different feel to it.
Right.
It is, like you said earlier, it's kind of like a Western kind of feel. So I would, I'd love to see more of that.
Yeah. Yeah, not be really affecting the galaxy at large, just the behind the scenes type of stuff. Because you figure the galaxy is a very, very large place. There are all kinds of other stories and adventures going on besides just the main we're fighting the Empire storyline.
I mean, but at the end, the thing that he did was, give Emphas Nest, all that coaxium, and it does fund the rebellion, and that's huge.
Yeah.
So even though it was like a tiny little blip on the screen, it was so important to the rebellion. So you still get the tie into like the rebellion is happening and the Empire is, shadowing everything.
And see, that's something I don't mind it being in the movie, but that's something I wouldn't care if it's in one way or the other. I think if Han is looking out for Han in these movies, that's completely fine with me. I think that lends to his smuggler outlaw type of character at this time period.
And the thing about this movie is we kind of saw everything that there is to know about Han that we know about Han. Like, we saw the Kessel Run. We saw the Game of Sabacc. Like, there's so much that we had questions about that were answered in this movie. It's like, okay, well, what new things can we learn about Han and Chewie?
Yeah, I think they got the bullet points out of the way, so if they did a sequel, at least what I hope is that they can dive into the character relationships better, like flesh out Han and Chewie, and show why they have that very, very good bond, and they watch each other's back really well. Even, I'd love to see more with Han and Lando.
Right.
Like, is this...
Oh, yeah.
Could this be...
That'd be great.
It's hard... I guess it's hard to tell, or you could spin it both ways, that when Han looks up Lando in Empire and they go visit him and stuff like that, you could leave it where they left off in this movie, where he wins the Falcon from Lando and they go their separate ways and they don't meet up again until Empire. Or you could spin it where in the sequels they had other encounters and go on other adventures and missions and stuff, and then they still meet up in Empire and they have a little bit more backstory there.
Yeah, I think there's more history there. Like, that's how I feel. There has to be more history
Yeah,
there.
I hope so. Mainly because I want to see the two of them on screen together again, doing more stuff. I think that's really fun.
Yes. More Donald Glover.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes. And if they don't, I don't know whether... Because he's another one I feel like has popped up, is like people are asking for a Lando standalone movie now. Mm-hmm. So whether or not that's actually in the cards or not, but...
I mean, I would even, like you were saying with Boba Fett, I would take it in... more of him in the movie, because he wasn't in the full thing. I think Kira was in there more than Lando. So
yeah, I think that's probably right.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just speaking of other standalone stuff like that, and considering like we mentioned a few that are rumored, are there any of those, even the rumored ones, any of the ones that maybe you'd like to see, whether they're rumored, announced, or not yet mentioned? Any other characters or types of stories that you'd want to see in some sort of spin-off?
Definitely an Obi-Wan Kenobi standalone.
And they have to get Ewan back for that. You can't do that without Ewan.
Right? Maybe that's why I want to see him in an Obi-Wan Kenobi movie. I mean, I'm really sad that Rebels is gone, so I would not mind an Ahsoka movie.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like, I follow a lot of Ahsoka fandom on Twitter, and we'd all be okay if we had an Ahsoka standalone movie.
And there's some gray areas in her story too that need fleshed out. So whether they do that in an animated show or a book I mean, she already had one book, but if they give her another book and stuff like that, that's another character I think I would probably lose my shit if they showed up from the cartoon to live action. I think that would be crazy.
I would jump up in the theater and run around screaming, like twirling my shirt around my head like a helicopter. It would be me. Someone would have to tackle me. It would be that amazing.
Theater security.
Oh man, there is a huge Ahsoka following out there. It's pretty amazing. But I mean, she, like you were saying, she has a big gray area from the time that she, we weren't sure if Vader had killed her, to when she shows up at the end of Rebels. So,
well, that gets explained in Rebels, right? No. You're right, because they put her back sort of like where she came from.
We weren't like, everyone was like, was Ahsoka alive? And then Dave Filoni came out and he's like, Ahsoka lives.
Well, I was thinking about like the whole like time travel thing that was introduced in Rebels. And they sort of like they pluck her out of there. Right. Yeah. But I think they put her right back where she came from.
Yes.
So yeah, there is that couple years then that's sort of a gray area. Yeah, because she comes back at the finale of Rebels. She's adulting looking, a lot more older, I think.
She's in a very like Obi-Wan Kenobi cloak kind of, right, with her staff.
And we don't even know how that story's going, because I feel like that the way Rebels ended, that could have jumped off into another story somewhere else. So whether we see that in a live action movie or some other extended universe canon stuff, I think that story needs to be expanded upon too. And
I think I did hear that Kira was getting a Forces of Destiny episode.
Okay.
I think I read that.
Do they still have the main actresses voicing roles for that too?
They do. Okay. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Because I know it was a big deal that like Daisy Ridley and Felicity Jones and stuff were recording for that. I didn't know if that trend continued. I have to get. I think I saw on YouTube they actually, because I know they're short episodes, but I think they've sort of put them together in like a half-hour volume.
Yes.
On some of them, I really have to go back and watch some of those volumes. I haven't done that yet.
I want to say I pulled it up on demand from Comcast.
Oh, okay.
And watched them together, but they didn't have like the newer ones on there.
Gotcha. I'll have to look for that then. I think that's pretty much what I have. I don't know if we missed anything. Anything else you want to touch on or talk about?
I think some of my takeaways were things that we already talked about, like how Solo was given his name. Like that was pretty interesting. But like you were saying, I didn't realize it could have been one of those moments that weren't. I think
it could have been done differently. Yeah.
Like obviously the Sabacc game where he does actually win the Falcon, which
Well, that brings.
I was so surprised it wasn't going to happen at the beginning of the movie, like when he first meets Lando. And
well, that brings
this has to be the game. This has to be it, and it's not. When
they meet back up in Empire, and Lando says to him like, "What'd you do to my ship?" and Han says, "Hey, you lost her to me fair and square." That you see that completely played out in the exact way, like Lando's cheating. Mm-hmm. Han could have cheated because he stole the card, but he didn't. He won completely fair without using the extra card. So it brings a whole nother layer to that conversation, which I thought was really cool to see play out.
Mm-hmm. Is it really Lando's to begin with? Like, I feel like at the beginning of the movie, it's like impounded.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking that too. Now that you mention it, yeah, because you make it seem like he's saying it's his ship, but really he could just be stealing it from the lot. But
it had like a DJ kind of feel to it, like when DJ stole the chip.
But it was like pimped out, and I feel like Lando's effects. Like it has all those capes in there. The bar is there.
A wet bar.
But I mean, that doesn't mean the ship wasn't impounded some way, somehow, and he just wanted to get it back, so he enlisted his new friends to get it back for him.
We talked about, I had noted like the Pargol was like one of those question marks that I had. I loved L3. She was fantastic. I would. I feel like we need more of her in the movie. I think that was all I had written down, really.
Okay. Yeah, I think I definitely want to see it again. I don't know how soon I'll get around to seeing it again. Because a lot of the stuff that we talked about that I didn't catch the first time, I definitely want to try to keep an eye out for the second time. And I feel like and I mentioned this before, movies that I see that I guess I want to be sure of how I feel about them, and like the first time I sort of have to let it wash over me, and then the second time I really have to dive into it and try to digest it and see how I feel when it come out the other side. So watching it just the one time and talking about it now, I really feel like I might rate it higher than maybe what I actually think if I see it again, but I don't know. I'm curious if it affects how I feel about the movie if I see it again. Because if I come out of it the second time and feel the same way I do now, then I'm pretty solid where I'm gonna stay.
Right. I think that it kind of has that Last Jedi quality where you walk out and you're like, yeah, that was good, but then you see it again, and you're like, no, that was really good.
Yeah. I was surprised that I wanted to see a sequel when it was over, and two, how much I really just kind of wanted to sit down and talk to someone about this when it was over. Because I wasn't sure how much you were going to be able to really dive into what happened and what they talked about and shown in this movie. If it was just backstory for Han that we sort of already knew. But yeah, there's a lot more here to unpack than I think I expected.
Right. I feel like they put a lot of work into this movie.
Yeah.
With all the references that they had, and like we were saying, tying it into everything that we know about the original 3 movies, and everything that you were saying about the system, C-3PO talking to the ship and Lando making comments like that. Like, it all is tying in. So someone's doing the research, and they did a great job.
Oh, yeah. That story group is putting in some overtime.
And it's like, these people who are upset about it, I'm like, you just don't know how hard they're working to make you happy. And why is nothing making you happy?
Everybody just likes to be bitter. I feel like that's part of internet culture now.
It hurts my heart.
Yeah, that's why I can't. Maybe that's why I'm not on Twitter as much as you are, because I can't stand to read some of that shit. It just pisses me off.
Twitter is a harsh place, and it's kind of like one of those things. Being a Raylo is kind of your happy place where you find all these people who are just absolutely enamored and happy and joyous with this movie, and then you go on Twitter and everyone's so miserable.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
Shout out to my Raylos.
It's a tough crowd out there.
It is a tough crowd.
All right, so we'll wind down with, do you want to try to give it a rating out of 10?
I would definitely give it a 9.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
maybe next time I see it, 9.5. Who knows?
Like I said, I think I do have to see it again. After a first viewing, I'm leaning somewhere in the 8.5 range. And I thought I was going to go as low as maybe a 7, but again, the more we talk about this and the more I dive into it and the more I talk about what I like, it's like I have to rate it higher than that because there is a lot in here to dig into and a lot to like.
I think it would have been higher for me if Alden was a little bit more Harrison Ford-ish.
Okay.
But, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just he doesn't look like him to me.
And I think that's a hang-up.
Yeah.
A little bit. I mean, I like that he's not trying to talk like Harrison Ford and really do... I didn't feel like he was doing a lot of the mannerisms of Harrison Ford. He really just tried to do his own thing and keep the charisma and charm that Han Solo has. And sort of like that attitude of like, I could talk myself out of any situation. There's a few times where he just chimes in when he shouldn't, and he gets himself into trouble half the time, but that's the character. That's what Han does. He talks his way out of stuff.
Right.
So
I did see this one part, and I was saying like his profile when he's on the Millennium Falcon for the first time, but he's not obviously allowed to be in the pilot role, and he's sitting back in his profile and he just starts to smile, and I hit Jen because Jen was sitting next to me, and I'm like, he looks just like Harrison Ford right then and there. If I could have had that the whole movie, I would have been happier. But I think that like you said, it's a hang up. I just wish he was a little bit more Harrison Ford-esque.
Yeah, and it's hard not to compare him to Harrison Ford. I feel like everybody's doing that regardless of whether you're conscious of it or not. That's just, if you've seen the other Star Wars movies, you can't help but compare him to Harrison Ford.
Right.
I mean, Harrison, from what I understand, gave the sign-off that he approved this movie and really liked it and liked Alden's performance and all that stuff, but you gotta wonder if at the same time if Harrison Ford is just happy it's not him doing it, and if he's just happy it's somebody else.
Yeah.
So, that could be too. Alright, any final thoughts? Otherwise, we'll close it down.
Yeah, go see this movie.
Yeah, I second that.
Don't be a stubborn fanboy. Go see the movie.
Yeah, it's worth checking out. Feel free to comment on Facebook page or anywhere that you listen to this and let us know what you think. And speaking of all that, you can, if you enjoyed the show, please stop by iTunes. You can leave us a 5-star rating and review. Be sure to share, subscribe, favorite the show wherever you can listen to us at, which we should now be available on Google Play if you haven't found us on there yet. All you Android users can now find us easily through Google. And again, as always, you can find us on Facebook, search Bry Guy Super Friends, or go to facebook.com/Bry Guy Super Friends. And you can send us questions, comments, topic suggestions, all that kind of stuff through Facebook, or you can email us, bryguysuperfriends@gmail.com, or at BGSuperFriends on Twitter. Those last two, I rarely check. Paula knows. She sends me stuff through Twitter all the time. I don't ever respond. But you can try us. We'll get to you eventually.
Twitter's the new Facebook.
On behalf of Paula and myself, thank you for listening, and we will talk to you next time.